internalize these words, which are coming from the Buddha, coming about the Buddha's view of the world. And the reason to listen is to if we choose, to hear it as advice. Okay, every word is advice, because what these views are Buddha's views, and where he gets these views from, is from his own observation. This is his observation. The Buddhism is really the observation of this person called Buddha, and all the people since then who rectified it, verified it as the way reality is. And basically, Buddha is saying that this is how reality is. This is his observation. He's not asking you to believe it, but we listen to it, think about it, and then apply it. And he is saying this is the method, how to get happy and how to stop suffering. This is what he's saying, basically. So we listen to his advice, and if we like to apply it, that's up to us. So that we can, in the end, the result of all this practice is to become less neurotic, less miserable, less depressed, less anxious, less fearful, less attached, less jealous, less miserable, more kind, more wise, more clear, more fulfilled, and more useful. That's it, bottom line. And who doesn't want that? So we think we're here together to do that. Okay. Huh? What happened?
I'm just going to give you
what
a gallery view.
I don't want this. I don't want to see me. I'll look at the gallery. Yeah, the gallery form. What happened to it? It changed it. It's okay. Much better. Yeah. Thanks, Sonny. Okay. Now, we talked last week. I think we presented the overview, the big overview, and just talked a little bit about it last week. So again, let's just repeat. Many people who like Buddhism and even apply Buddhism, maybe 5%, 10%, 22%, whatever, you can do what you like. Many people have no interest in karma, as if somehow it's some extra kind of thing. Or as someone asked last week, one of you, I think, I can't remember. And it's a really kind of powerful question, because initially it doesn't appear relevant. What's the point of this? A person, I think, who was it who asked last week? Are you here tonight? You, wasn't it? Yeah. It's a really interesting point, isn't it? So say your question again. It's very powerful. What was your question? Remember?
How does it, knowing it experientially, the
what effect does it have on your life?
Yeah.
So this is kind of, okay, this is really, for the Buddhist view, without understanding karma, you don't know what to think and do. So it's a bit like, you're asking, it's a bit like we're talking about a garden and you've never heard of botany before. And then you ask, what's the point of learning botany? How does it help somebody? So what would your answer be? What would your answer be? Do you understand my point? What's the point of learning botany? How would it help you as a person to learn botany? Assuming you want to grow a garden.
Right, yeah.
It explains what's there, why it's there. And then if you use that law, it will then explain to you what to do to produce the garden you'd like in the future, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Well, that's the point here. This is the point. Buddha's basically saying we create ourselves. This is kind of a shocking concept, isn't it? It's a bizarre idea, in fact. Because, we have a very strong view. Either that someone called God created us, or Mummy and Daddy created us. And in both cases, it doesn't seem, neither of those seems to point to any responsibility in ourselves, in us. In terms of who we are, But this is the Buddhist point. He is saying every tiny thing that you are, since the time you're conceived in your mother's womb, you came programmed with tendencies from your own past practice. So we have to take the view here of past lives, okay? It's our hypothesis. So everything that you are, the shape you are, the things you like, the things you don't like, the things you're good at, the things you're not good at, how you meet people, how they treat you, how they see you. We all just assume this is just like life. It happens to us, and we really had very little to do with it. But the Buddha's saying every tiny one of those experiences is a fruit of things. You are the one who set you up. You are the one who set yourself up for all of these experiences. People who like you, people who don't like you, having good qualities, bad qualities. All of these are the result of your past habits. So you are the creator. That garden in there, you didn't realize, but you produced that garden. And if you have you have the opportunity to turn it into the garden you want. So you are the garden. Your life is your garden. Does that concept make sense? So in other words, without this, the Buddhist point of view, big picture, without this, you don't know who you are and why you are, and you don't know what to do with it. Because then we get into let's go into the details now. When we drill down a little bit into this principle, then his way, first of all, Buddha's saying the most general point the Buddha's making is that everything we think and do and say, every being, every sentient being, every mind possessor, every monkey, ant, dog, human, every millisecond of what we think, what goes on in the mind, and then what we do and say on the basis of that is the process of producing the person I become. That's the way to put it. That's the process. That's quote unquote creating karma. Every millisecond of what I think and do and say is what produces the person I become. So if that's true, and I know, so this is where we drill down, then Buddha would say every millisecond of what we think and do and say that you label positive or virtuous, and this makes us nervous because it sounds like religion, you know, but this is Buddhist psychology. And let's define that. That the actions of body, speech, and mind driven by love, kindness, generosity, forgiveness, non-anger, non-attachment, non-jealousy, you know, in other words, driven by a so-called positive quality, that's what's called creating good karma, meaning that sowing those seeds in your mind millisecond by millisecond will have the result of you in the future receiving the benefit of those, which is your happiness, your fulfillment, your joy, your kindness, you're getting what you need and everything. We produce our own reality, in other words. It's a really shocking concept. His Holiness Dalai Lama says it's like self-creation. So then we drill down, everything that you think and do and say that's labeled virtuous will ripen, broadly speaking, ripen as your happiness in terms of the life, in terms of who you meet, in terms of your personality, in terms of the things that happen to you. And then everything you think and do and say that's so-called negative and non-virtuous, and their actions driven by anger, fears, attachment, jealousy, anxiety, depression, we know these qualities, they will produce suffering. So of course, initially, this sounds like religion in the sense that if God says you do this and this, you'll get punished. We hear it like that. We have this dualistic view that hears it as punishment and reward, you know. But like I point out, and it's really incredibly necessary to listen to hear this point. In Buddhism, there's no such concept because there's no creator. Therefore, there's no punisher and there's no rewarder. We are the producer of ourselves. My mother, my Catholic mother, she used to say, virtue has its own rewards. That's what Buddha's saying. And like I like to point out also, it doesn't sort of seem initially kind of powerful, but we know we produce ourselves. So if you're going to turn into a carpenter, a musician, a cook, you know the main factor in producing that musician or carpenter or cook is you. You turn yourself into a cook. And which part of you? Your mind. You learn the theories, you learn the recipes. You learn precisely the recipes. You train your mind. You learn to think like a cook. You know the recipes, and then your hands do the job. You produce a cook. You produce a musician. You produce a carpenter by working first with your mind, and then your hands do the job in those cases. Well, Buddha says we produce a happy person and we produce a suffering person. That's a surprise to us. That's really the simplest way to put it. Because why? Is because we believe that the main cause of my happiness is out there somewhere. This is quite serious. See, that's an actual philosophy we live according to. We don't think of it that way, but it's completely instinctive. We assume happiness comes from the cake, the person, the weather, the job, the external. Buddha's not saying it doesn't play a role. But this is the main point, and this is where the major difference. You could argue that's what samsaric philosophy is. That's how we all are, and that's how we all feel. No one taught us that. Our mother didn't have to teach us that. A dog and a monkey feel the same way. And that's the deep instinct of these delusions, Buddha says, this literal misconception that we're totally driven by, that we believe is true. That when we get the things that we like, that's what the cause of happiness is. And we get the things that we don't like, that's the cause of suffering. So Buddha's not saying they don't play a role, but this is the crucial difference. He's saying they aren't the main player. The cake is not the main cause of your happiness. The boyfriend is not the main cause of your happiness. And it sounds easy to say it, but to understand this technically, taking the Buddhist view of karma, needs quite a bit of thinking about. It's quite a precise approach, you know. So we know we can produce a musician. Well, Buddha's saying we can produce a happy person. We can produce a person that isn't suffering and that doesn't have suffering things happen to us. It's not overnight like anything. You don't become a musician overnight either. It's a process, you know. So the simple principle for the Buddha, according to the law of karma, is that this is the words, that virtuous actions produce happiness and non-virtuous actions produce suffering. So even to see the whole thing about karma in terms of merely happiness and suffering almost initially seems a bit simplistic. But analyze your life. Analyze your life. What else is there you want? I mean, all the things we do are to get happiness. Okay, maybe we've got to analyze what that means. We need to, because we've all got different views about what happiness means. Perhaps we mightn't all use those terms, you know. So another way of putting, we'll go into these details, is that everything we think and do and say, the Buddha uses the analogy all the time of seeds and fruits. This is why botany is a good analogy, you know. Everything we think and do and say sows seeds in the mind, drops seeds in the mind, if you like. And these seeds will ripen in 4 different ways in the future. And if you analyze these 4 ways, you'll understand your life. You'll see your life. You can divide your life into these 4 categories. So the first one is a type of rebirth. And of course, this is where it's most abstract for us. To think that our consciousness, when we die, and it leaves this body, it will be reborn in another body. That's the big shock for us. You know, if you're a Christian, you accept that, except there's only 2 kinds of bodies. It's hell body or heaven body, isn't it? So they believe in reincarnation, but only 2 kinds. You get born in the hell realms or you get born in heaven. You know, you don't get born as a human again. You don't get born as an animal again. But, you know, you could argue that Buddha does, you know, but Christians do believe in reincarnation. They don't call it reincarnation, that's all. They call it going to heaven or hell. So Buddha's the same view, that your consciousness will continue, except that he doesn't talk about a soul. There's no concept of a soul in Buddhism. He talks about mind and consciousness, that's it, you know. So it can produce another kind of rebirth. In fact, the fundamental view of karma, this is all dealt with in incredible depth in all literature from thousands of years, and way back before the Buddha to the Hindus. They're the ones who looked into this and observed this and presented this. Buddha's got his own take on it. But, you know, the Buddhist perspective is your consciousness. This is about this very shocking. And initially, all we can do is take it as our working hypothesis. The essence of who you are, your mind or your consciousness, which are not physical, do not come from mother or father. They're not a function of physical. They're not in their nature physical. They come along with the physical. And yes, mother and father give us the body, no argument. But your mind isn't the physical. And second, you're not the handiwork of a creator. And they're the usual 2 options, aren't they? And in both cases, we began in our mother's womb. Okay, if you're a Jew, God puts the soul there a few months after conception, I've heard. For Christians, God puts the soul there the second of conception. If you're a materialist, you are only the egg and the sperm. So we have these different views, don't we? But in both cases, all those cases, you began in your mother's womb. There's no idea that something of you came from before. That's the Buddha's idea. That's the Buddha's observation. That your consciousness, a continuity of your mental continuum, the term they use, this river of mental moments, this sort of chain of links that go back and back and back. If you had perfect memory, we can see logically, if you had perfect memory, you could go back each millisecond. This moment of my consciousness, where did it come from? A previous moment of consciousness. Where did that come from? A previous moment of consciousness. Where did that come from? A previous moment. And be unbroken chain of mental moments. And you'd get back inexorably to the first second of conception in your mother's womb. You'd track back to there. So the question is, what about the second before? Well, the egg was in mummy's body, sperm was in daddy's body, and has nothing to do with the creator as far as Buddha is concerned. No concept like that. Your consciousness, the second goes back a second before that in its own continuity, and a few weeks before that was in a previous body. It's all in the Buddhist literature, it's all there. And there's various options of types of bodies that we can get, all depending on the karma we create. So in terms of our future, no, even in terms of our present, okay. So then a few weeks before conception in our mother's womb, our consciousness was in this previous body, and we went through the death process, and that's dealt with in great detail. And certain things occurred at the time as you started to stop breathing. This death process started, this deconstruction process of the various components of the person, whatever you were, a dog, human, ant, kangaroo, Buddha would say. It's all detailed, it's all described. And then the death process occurred, and before you stop breathing, let's just say we're a human before, a few weeks before this conception, at the time of our mother's womb. You know, the death process started. Before you stop breathing, gradually is deconstructing. By the time you stop breathing, before you stop breathing, particular things occur technically. Then one of the karmic seeds that you planted in your mind yourself from your past virtuous actions, in particular, actions of non-killing, a conscious intentional decision to not kill, probably, as Lama Zopa says, practice in the framework of living in vows of not killing. We'll go into this one. This is really powerful. A huge condition that makes it a lot easier for virtuous karma to ripen. One of those karmic seeds would have been triggered at that time, before you even stop breathing. And that karmic seed was triggered at that point. That already was very precisely determining which womb you'd be born in. In our case, our mother, this particular human mother, was already determined by that point, and by nobody else but you, your karma with that mother. Strong history with our mummy. So a particular karmic seed to get a human body as a result of non-killing specifically was triggered. And then, you know, maybe your mother and father haven't even met yet. At some point when your mind leaves the body, and then a few weeks later, when mummy and daddy hopped into bed or wherever they hop, your consciousness would have gone there very specifically. Not random. No one's in charge of it. Karma takes care. It's a natural law. It's a natural law. It's the biggest thing to keep hearing, a natural law. At the same time as that seed which determined I would go to this present mother's human womb, at the same time, the other three, the karmic seeds of the other three tracks of karma, if you like, just a term I use, would also have been all triggered. So that means, one, that all the karmic seeds that would then produce the personality of the person in this body. I mean, there's a body, and then it has a mind. So all those tendencies. So the common view, of course, if we're Christian, and probably I think even if we're Christian as well as materialists, we would think we get anger from our mother and jealousy from our mother and love from our mother and being good at music from our mother. We assume that all comes along with the genes and the DNA, isn't it? I don't know what the Christian teaching is, but certainly the materialist view, you get all of those from your mother. No, you don't get them from your mother at all. These are already planned, determined, programmed before you even left the previous body. All the karmic seeds that would produce the mind, your tendencies, your personality traits, whether you're Mother Teresa or Hitler, from your past habits. They're basically a bunch of habits from having done them before. This is the huge point. So the benefit of knowing this is when you look in the garden, you now know, oh, well, there's a weed. Now I know what it is. So saying it's a weed, you know what caused it. If it's a flower, you know what caused it. If it's a herb, you know what caused it. So it's explaining, and then you have to decide, do you want that weed or do you want that herb? And then you can use that law to determine for the future, I don't want weeds, so I better not plant them. And I do want flowers and herbs, so I must plant them. Well, the same here, learning the law of karma. So we look into our personality now, and this is what we came fully programmed with this personality, these traits from the second of conception. They were already triggered, as I said, even before we died in the past life. Look into our mind. We might tendency to be kind, loving, patient, generous, good at music, good at football, good at anger, good at jealousy, good at depression. Look at our tendencies. We've got hundreds of them, emotional and intellectual and artistic, whatever labels you want. These are all one's own tendencies from having done them before. This is a fundamental point. This is a fundamental point. You do not get them from God. You do not get them from mummy and daddy. You might share them with mummy and daddy. There's no problem there. This is a shock if we take the neuroscientific view. It's a shock to hear that you don't get them from your parents. Yes, you can see the evidence of your qualities in your brain and in your DNA and the genes. You can. But they're not, if you like, they're the physical indicators of what's in your mind, which is not physical and which does not come from your parents, and which you bring with you from before. This actually has a major implication, because the implication in daily life, because, you know, if you're born with anger and you think you got it from your mother, of course you blame your mother. And I think you should blame your mother. I agree. If your mother created you and she is the source of your anger, I think it's completely shocking that she should make you and give you anger. I mean, hear that point. It is very shocking to think that she should give you anger. How dare she? But we think that. But at the same time, your therapist says you've got to forgive her. Or stop blaming her. I'm not sure you should stop blaming her. I mean, please hear my point. So the Buddha says, no, she didn't give you them, Robina. You brought them with your own self, sweetheart. So the implication of this is huge. It means you own who you are. You own it. It's you. You own who you are. You don't blame anybody else. It's kind of powerful. It brings accountability. That's certainly absolutely what I can say for myself. When I first heard, I told you, I think I said this last week, when I first heard the teachings on karma from Lama Zopa, in the first teachings I heard, this is the piece that was missing for me. I loved karma. I mean, I've been a Catholic, but I loved the idea of karma, that I create myself, you know, that my qualities are mine, instead of finding who was to blame. It's a huge point. That's the major implication in terms of as you grow, as you develop practice, you know, you take responsibility, not blame yourself, you own them. I must have practiced anger before. I must have practiced jealousy before. I must have practiced music before. You own both. You own both. It's very powerful. You grow up, become accountable. So the first way your karma ripens is you get this human body. You created the cause due to past non-killing, and then you created the cause of having some strong history, that particular person called your mother and your father. These two people, and it's not random. If it's a natural law, that's the part that's shocking as well. If it's a natural law, it's not random. It can't be random. Laws, if there are laws, the activity is not random. It can't be. It's a shocking concept to us. So then the second way your karma ripens, and these seeds are triggered even before you stop breathing, at the same time as that main karmic seed that said, I'm going to get born to that mummy and that daddy, is my mind. My past habits produce this person. The third one is, the first one's called the fully ripened result, a type of rebirth. The second one is called your tendencies, similar to the cause, your habits, basically. They're a bunch of habits. We become programmed. We come into this life programmed with our own habits, not mothers and fathers. There's psychologically, this is a massive difference. I mean, it's not just a minor point. This is absolutely huge. The experiential implications of these two different points are huge. It's fascinating. The third way your karma ripens is called experiences similar to the cause. And look at us. I'm sure I mentioned all this last week. We'll continue now. We'll go deeper. We'll drill down a bit more. So this basically, we're social beings, aren't we? You get born in another human body. This is intense. We have fathers, siblings, aunties, uncles, pets, dogs, cockroaches, neighbors, grandmas, grandpas. In our life up until now, look at the hundreds of sentient beings, if not thousands, whom we've crossed paths with. And observe, think about it, how they have treated you and seen you is basically this karma. And if you think about it, since you're born, since you're conceived, people have either been kind to you or not. There's hardly two, there's no more divisions. There's a third lot, they're strangers, they've done neither. Forget them. There are those that have harmed you and those that have helped you, one degree or another, and they often change roles, don't they? You know. So these are called experiences similar to the cause. Whose cause? Your cause. Internally, these are habits or intentions or tendencies similar to the cause. Which cause? My having done them before, or they having some kind of experience of having them done to me, the way I'm seen and treated. This is very, again, so shocking because we just assume we're all innocent victims. I didn't ask to get born. It's not my fault. Somebody walks along the street and gives you $100. There's no logical reason, you know. We don't care. Give me more $100. But if they punch me, definitely we care. We just think it's all good luck and bad luck. We say that. Good luck and bad luck. Buddha says that's superstitious. It's like thinking roses and herbs are good luck and bad luck. It's ridiculous. There's a law that runs it. And the fourth way your karma ripens is even called environmental karma. So here we are with a body, and here we are with a mind, and here we are with experiences in relation at the hands of others. But we don't float in the sky. We live on this earth. We have an environment. And indeed, the environment includes people as well. But there are closer relationships with people, which is the third karma. Experiences similar. Of course, people steal from you, lie to you, love you, hate you, rape you, give you $1 million, you know, are kind to you. Good things happen and bad things happen. Every one, tiny one of these experiences is the fruit of a seed I planted in the past in relation to that person. Karma's pretty personal, you know. I mean, this is really quite a new concept to us if we haven't heard it before. And to really drill down and unpack it is so necessary if we want to try and use it. You know, it's not enough just to say, oh, it's karma. How does it work? I don't know. Oh, tell me about that flower over there. Oh, it's botany. How does it work? Oh, I don't know. Well, what good is that? You've got to learn the law. Then you apply it. Because you know you want a good garden in the future. Now you know the laws, you can determine the garden you get. You know you want happiness, and this is the real implication. So happiness, let's look at that, because it just sometimes sounds kind of boring. Who wants happiness, for God's sake? Not sure. We think it's rather silly. And then we talk about there's 15 different kinds of happiness and different kinds of things like that. So the Buddhist idea is pretty straightforward. So in terms of tendencies, I think if we thought about it, if we think about it, we know we've got tendency to be anxious, angry, jealous. We know these. And we know they are painful. We know that if we had a choice, and Buddha says we do have the choice to work on it, we wouldn't rather not be that way. Surely we'd think that. And then we know the tendencies called love and kindness and confidence and self-respect and generosity and forgiveness and patience. I think we can feel that they're nice qualities. Well, the fruit of practicing these, one of the fruits is that you get better at them. Practice makes perfect. We hardly be surprised. If you keep practicing the piano, you keep getting better at the piano. So it's not, it does surprise us, but it's shocking that it surprises us. That if you keep being angry, jealous, resentful, anxious, what person do you think you're producing except an angry, attached, jealous person? I mean, it's almost so uncomplicated, but we make it complicated because we think it's not our fault. They make me this way. Those events cause this. So we think it's not our fault that we're angry. In fact, we even think I'm allowed to be angry. Look what they did to me. That's how we think. This really is looking at. It's really intense. Of course, we're allowed to be angry. We're the boss. But all Buddha's saying is, and this is the most fundamental part about karma, forget future lives, okay? The most fundamental point, in the same way that you know, if you want to play Bach music well, you really abide by the laws of Bach's music. You know you do that. You don't think you're being a slave if you do that. You know you want to play Bach. So you play Bach's music, and you better be very rigorous and disciplined about how you do it. And that's what produces a musician. We're not surprised by that. And we know everything that goes on in your mind when it comes to music absolutely is important, because that's the theory. That's your mind. So the Buddha's saying exactly the same. If you want to be happy, if you want to learn to be a happy person, you can learn to be a happy person, forget even future lives. Practice. It won't happen overnight. Don't be guilty about it. You have to practice lessening anger, lessening stealing and killing and lying and jealousy and depression and anxiety and fears, to lessen those. And this is intensely hard work, but possible. And then to grow the habit to be patient and kind and intelligent and self-respectful and blah, blah, blah. That's the job. That's the job of applying Buddha's methodology to learn to become a happy person. But we think happiness is hit and miss because we believe it's all out there. This is so shocking to hear. It doesn't come overnight. Of course it doesn't. It's massive practice. But this is what Buddha is saying is possible. So that's the first one, in terms of the mind. You practice the habits you want to cultivate. You practice being patient. You practice not killing. First of all, you control your body and speech. They're the first level. You don't use your body and speech to harm others because they're driven by delusions and they can only produce suffering in you. Forget the harm they do to others. The very first level of karma for the Buddha is you're the beneficiary. Then that's just to turn yourself into a more relaxed, more disciplined person. Then you work on your mind, become less attached, less angry, less jealous, less depressed. You learn to be like your own therapist. Buddha's a cognitive therapist, I swear to you. Whoever that fellow was back in the 60s who created this concept of cognitive behavioral therapy, that's Buddha, precisely. Not joking. It's intensely hard work, but it's possible. So then you've got experiences similar to the cause. How you're seen and treated by others. And this part's intense because we always assume that what I am in here has to have a reflection in how I'm seen by others. So if I'm speaking the truth, but someone doesn't believe me, it's so shocking for us. We don't understand it. We're shocked, you know. If we're being kind, but somebody abuses us, it's just too shocking for our mind. We can't put it together. But these are two tracks of karma that have no direct relationship. The experiences you have at the hands of others are seeds you planted, could be in 57 lives ago, that are now ripening as someone being kind to you, or ripening as someone believing your words, even if you're born with a tendency to lie and you're lying out in your teeth, you know, like Mr. Trump. Some people believe every word he says. Just due to the past karma he has got with them from having spoken the truth to them 57 lives ago. So now they see him as speaking the truth now. So everything, so we come into this life program all these millions of seeds, and these seeds, one, the one that was triggered that will ripen as the type of rebirth, two, all the millions of seeds that will ripen as my personality, three, all the millions of seeds that will ripen as my experiences, and four, the seeds that will ripen in the way that the very physical world impacts upon me. So if I want happiness in terms of a rebirth, happiness in terms of tendencies, happiness in terms of experiences, and happiness in terms of the environment, then what do I need to do? And I think if I'm going to have another life, thank you, I would prefer that. Yes. So I do want to get another human birth, let's say, as opposed to an ant's body, let's just say. Then I need to know what causes a human body. Then when I'm born a human being, do I want to be born with nice tendencies like kindness and intelligence and love and compassion and no tendency to kill and no tendency to lie and no tendency to steal? Well, yes, I would like that. Thank you. Then what do? I practice those things. It's hardly rocket science. I practice those tendencies. So I'll be born with a happy, fulfilled, content mind, not to mention intelligent and joyful and loving and compassionate. So the causes of that mind are those practices, hardly rocket science. If I want experiences, if I want happy experiences at the hands of others, what does that mean? Well, I don't want to be lied to. I want to be believed, so I don't lie. So, okay, do I want to be born with a tendency to not lie? So I don't lie. Do I want to have people believe my words and not disbelieve me? So I don't lie. Do I want to not be killed? So do I want to have a tendency to not kill? I do want a tendency to not kill, so I stop killing. So do I want to be killed? No, I don't. So I stop killing. I won't get killed. I won't die young. Do I want people to like me? So yes, so I grow the habit to be nice to people, and then I will get liked by people. So they will ripen as tendencies and they'll ripen as an experience. And what about the environment? Okay, do I want an environment that's healthy, that the food I eat nourishes me, the water's tasty, there's not much pollution, even if there is, that doesn't harm me? Yes, thank you, I do that. So then what do I do? So in other words, if I'm, by not killing one action, by deciding to live my life in a commitment to not kill any sentient being, I will get born as a human. 1, I will have a tendency to not kill. 3, I won't have an experience of getting killed or dying young. And 4, I'll have a really nice physical, healthy body, and the food and the weather and the environment itself will nourish me. That's the result of non-killing. Or flip it over. What's the result of killing? You get another type of rebirth, suffering rebirth, like an animal, other kinds. And then even in a human life, you'd have, if you haven't purified all your killing karma, you'd have a tendency to kill. You'd have an experience of being killed or dying young, and you'll have an experience of getting sick, or like COVID. And I mean, look at the world, karmic, environmental karma of millions of people dying young, getting sick, being harmed by the physical environment, including your auntie who kisses you. You get COVID, So do I want suffering in terms of the environment? No. Do I want experiences of suffering at the hands of others? No. Do I want negative tendencies? No. Do I want an unhappy suffering rebirth? No. So it's in my hands. It's my decision. So all the basic instructions in terms of karma from Buddha's own experience it's all rooted in virtue and non-virtue. Of course, it sounds religious to us, but it's psychological for the Buddha. So the key point, the whole entire key point, the implication, the experiential implication is that I am the person who produces my future. Yes, I'm given a body by mummy and daddy, no problem. But it's up to me to do what I can with that body, which I created the course to get anyway. I created the course to get born to that mother and father. They didn't make me. My mind came along at the time of conception and entered into that egg and sperm, which enabled that egg and sperm to turn into my body, Otherwise, it would have gone down the toilet like the rest. So we're the main player in who we become and in who we are now. This is Buddha's view. Very different view, I have to admit. Of course, you can't prove it immediately. Of course, you can't. So what do? You have to check up on the Buddha, see if he's reasonable, listen to his teachings, listen to see other people who practice Buddhism, see if you can think do some due diligence, see if there's reasonable people, looks like reasonable, listen to the theories, take them as your working hypothesis, and go one step at a time. That's it, They're the general principles. It's all rooted in terms, in terms of happiness and suffering, virtue and non-virtue. So the hard part, of course, is to see how, well, first of all, let's analyze what is a negative action. Well, I think we started doing this last week. How do you define an action as negative or positive? It's a really good question. Who decides, It's a really good point. Well, if you're a Christian, God decides. He's the boss. He made the world. As I always quote this Jesuit priest friend of mine, when I asked him, what is a sin? Who defines it as negative? He says, a sin is doing what God said not to do. That is the view of creative religion. God's the boss. And that's reasonable. If you have faith in God, that's fine. But that's not for the Buddha. Buddha says the same as Jesus, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie. The reason is fundamentally different. This is such an interesting point. Buddha says, Jesus says don't kill. Why not? Because God says. The priest said there is some aspect of natural law, meaning that people don't like getting killed. But the main factor that determines that action as negative, a sin, is that God said not to. That's the point. Buddha has got zero to do with it. Buddha also says don't kill, but the fact that he says it has nothing to do with its being negative. As far as he's concerned, it's a natural law. He says, guess what? People don't like getting killed. It hurts them. Hardly surprising. That's what determines it as an action that harms another, a negative action. But the crucial point here, and I think I said this before, and I say it continuously, and I think we miss this completely in our culture. The reason, at the very basic level of karma, the reason Buddha exhorts us not to kill is not because it harms another. It's because it will sow seeds in my mind that will produce my future suffering. A suffering rebirth, a tendency to kill, an experience of being killed, and an environmental result of killing. This is the Buddha's view. So we've got to really think about this, how this can be, how it can be. It's all explained in the literature, you know, it's quite subtle. It's not punishment. It's not reward. There's no punisher. There's no rewarder. It's a natural law. So what drives our practice from day one, and this is what we really do miss in our culture, is the wish not to suffer, to be fed up with the thought of suffering. I do not want to be harmed. I do not want suffering. I do not want people lying to me, stealing from me, killing me, raping me, harming me, cheating on me, giving me up. We know we don't want this. So if we take the view of these experiences being the weeds in our garden, we must have planted these by doing such actions, and we know we don't want this in the future. So it is logical we must stop planting those seeds again. I mean, it's hardly rocket science. It's in our hands. But of course, it takes a lot of confidence to do that because it looks so abstract. Initially, it's abstract concept, you know. I think it's not, if we could really get this first one, that, you know, that what goes on in your mind produces, even if nothing else, your own mental experiences. I mean, why is it surprising to us if we spend all the day being angry and shouting at the politicians and abusing our auntie and bad-mouthing the boyfriend? Why is it surprising to us that that produces more anxiety and more anger and more distress in ourselves? Why does it surprise us, I wonder? But it does. Someone needs to be muting yourself. Who's unmuted? Never mind, you stay unmuted, doesn't matter. I mean, this is what I think it does surprise us. I remember Lama Zopa says, and I was shocked when I say it, and it's really true. Because we see, I'm adding this piece. We're so addicted to believing that the external world, like the boyfriend and the cake and the weather, are the cause of my happiness and suffering. We actually don't really think our mind plays much role at all. We don't think we play a role. It's quite schizophrenic, really. I'm not being sarcastic. But it is quite hard to see it. I mean, I always use the example. I'm not trying to, the woman, is she here tonight? I don't think she is. She's not here. Anyway, a mother recently. A mother. She's not here. There's another class. It was another class. A mother, a woman, a mother who has a lot of problems with her daughter, okay? A lot of problems with her daughter. And the daughter lied, she said. The daughter lied a lot. She had good qualities. I asked her, she had wonderful qualities, other qualities, but she lies. So we've had a mother, and we've had mothers, and you are a mother. We know there's this intense, if you start to be a bit conscious, we know there's this intense dynamic, isn't there? For me, it's a bit like we're all playing tennis with somebody. And it's obvious however they hit the ball impacts upon you, how you hit the ball, and however you hit the ball impacts upon how they return it to you. So it's a really intense going and back and forth. But in a relationship, I think we feel we're this innocent victim just sitting there and this person's whacking tennis balls at us. How dare you play tennis at me like that? How dare you hit the ball that way? Why don't you do it this way? Why don't you do it that way? As if somehow it's not up to us to play tennis. But if we improve our tennis, that'll impact upon their tennis. We don't see it. In other words, we don't see the relationship as interdependent. So this mother, and she's an example, she sees the daughter's problem. But you've got to look at what lenses is she seeing the daughter through? Her own mind. So let's say she's got lots of anger. Let's say the mother, I didn't say she is, I'm not saying she has, let's say she has lots of anger. Then obviously if you've got your angry glasses on, everything your daughter does will appear very distorted, won't it? But you don't realize that your anger plays a role. My daughter does this. That's how we are in relationships. He did this and he did that and he did this, but you're not looking at anything you did at all. Look how painful it is when people go, I hear about people, partners going to group therapy. You this and you that, and I this and I that. We can't see what we do ourselves. It's quite astonishing. It's amazing, in fact, because we're so fixated on the other person, on the event, on the outside. Like I'm this innocent victim that plays no role in this. We don't think it's interdependent. Are we communicating? That's so powerful, you know. So to even begin to know that it's completely a dependent arising environment, how I am with that person, whether to label the person on the bus, your boss, your mother, it's a completely interdependent scenario. And when you realize if you change your mind, if you change the way you play tennis, the whole tennis match is different. But as Lama Zopa says, the vast majority of all humans on the planet have absolutely no idea that what goes on in their mind plays any role at all. This is beyond shocking, but I think it's true. Look at us, because we're fixated on the outside. That's everything as far as we're concerned, you know. It's fascinating. So, okay, so there's two things here then. There's two things. There's one, you know, one is the karma you bring with you. As they say, we are propelled by the force of our past actions. This tends to paralyze us a bit and we think it's all just fatalistic, you know. But everything you do is propelled by the force of your past actions. The tennis you play today is dependent upon the tennis you played in the past. How can you possibly say it's not? So everything you are today is dependent upon what you've done yesterday, day before, and what you brought with you from past lives. Because that's going to impact on how the other person sees you and how you how you interact together. It's incredibly dynamic. And this is where, if we begin to get this distinction between my own tendencies, the habits I bring with me, one track of karma, and the other one being the experiences at the hands of others, that's another track of karma. So it's so clear, a person like Mr. Trump, it's not just to do with people having views, you know, now. The Buddhist view would be that it's very much how he's seen by others is hugely dependent upon the particular, how we, in general, how we are seen by others is a major role in that, is the actions we have done to them in the past. So, for example, you are telling the truth. Right now, you know your mind. You have a tendency to be truthful. You've been like this since you're a little girl. But someone at work believes you are lying, convinced you are lying. We all have experiences like that, and it is unbearable. And we don't understand why. That's how karma works, you know. In just the same way that a person, you might, adores you. From day one, they meet you, they just adore you. You can be neurotic and ridiculous. They don't care. They just love you. That's due to your own past virtue with that person, that no matter what you do, like our mothers can be like that sometimes, some mothers just adore their child no matter what. That's a reflection of the karma you've got with that person from whichever 52 lives ago or something. So in other words, what we bring with us into this life and how we're seen by others is the relationship we've got with them is due to past, due to the past. It's huge. So we can have a good analysis of a person, let's say, who's like, a bit crazy. Let's say, well, okay, this is where the karmic one really shows. This applies to all beings. Like I always quote that my friend of mine on death row in Kentucky, Mitchell, who's a Buddhist, I've known him for 30 years, something like that. And he said, and there's another fellow there, and he comes to the classes when I go, and I know the guy, and he's very relaxed, easygoing looking. And Mitchell said, Robina, he thinks of torture all the time when it comes to extreme examples like this, or equally extreme example, like I just love watching some of these little children who play Bach, you know, at age of 3. I mean, you can't believe your eye. You believe, I think people have photoshopped YouTube. You can't believe what you're seeing, you know, isn't it? Equally, whether you have a psychopath or a genius musician, we can't answer in normal terms. We don't know why a child of the age of 3 has Bach in their mind. There's no answer in new terms of neuroscience in the modern world. Do you understand my point? We can see that. And equally, you should argue there's no reason why this person, this man, thinks of torture all the time. His mother didn't teach him. So we've all got tendencies of some kind or other. He clearly came into this life with a tendency to torture. I remember reading about one of these serial killer fellows, you know. He said since a tiny child, his mother didn't teach him, he was compelled to torture creatures, you know. He didn't know why. And this is the thing about now pleasure. This is where the about happiness comes in. This thing, did we talk about that last week or not? I can't remember. This is so important to understand, I tell you. The Buddhist analysis of the meaning of the word happiness. It's quite a technical point, but I want to explain it. I can't remember if we did it last week. I'm really sorry, I forget, but there's no harm in hearing it again. Okay, so in Buddhist psychology, there's 3 different categories of states of mind. There's no fourth. In your mind, there's those that are negative, I-based, fear-based, ego-based, neurotic, delusional, distressing, disturbing, anger, attachment, jealousy, you name it. We all know them. Cause of our suffering, distort the way the world is, cause us to harm others, awful. We can get rid of them. Those first lot. The next lot are the virtuous ones, the reasonable ones, the valid ones, love, kindness, intelligence, generosity, forgiveness, all these good ones, nice ones. Now, the third category, I call them the mechanics of the mind. They're all the bits and pieces of your mind that enable you to function. Whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need good concentration, don't you? Whether you're a sniper, you need really good concentration. You need really good attention, really good mindfulness. Mindfulness means the ability to keep your mind on track, something holy. Thieves need mindfulness, as Lama Zopa says. So mindfulness, the ability to remember what you're doing moment by moment. Intention, attention, paying attention, discrimination, distinguish between this and that, concentration. These are neither, this is why this is so specific to Buddhist psychology, but unless you really understand this, you won't get these words for Buddha. You won't understand the meaning. They're neither neurotic and delusional, like the first lot, that cause you suffering and cause you to harm others, anger, jealousy, depression. They're neither virtuous, like love or compassion or kindness, that cause you to be happy and cause you to help others. But they call them neutral insofar as they're neither negative nor positive. So that's why I prefer to call them the mechanics of the mind. They don't have a virtuous or non-virtuous character. Everybody needs them, whether you're a murderer or a meditator. So oddly, curiously, I'm sure we talked about this before, and I have to talk about it again because it's so important. One of those in the category is called feeling. This is so huge for Buddhism. This is huge for the Buddha. This one, he plucks it out and gives it special status. Feeling is not an equivalent of an emotion like we call it. No, there's only 3 kinds of feeling. Happy or pleasant feelings. Happiness, in other words. Unpleasant or suffering feelings, or neither, neutral. We'll forget the neutral in this case. So we've got happy feelings and unhappy feelings. Now, we know how this drives our lives. We only want the happy ones and we do not want the unhappy ones. So this is the point for the Buddha. If you track your day, okay, if you track your day like a little graph, you know, one way of tracking your day is in terms of what happened to you. Normally, that's how we think of our life. Tell me about your day today, and I'll tell you all about the events, won't I? Oh, the sun was shining at 8 o'clock. I got up and I had breakfast at 9 o'clock and spoke to Mary at 10 o'clock. And then the driver abused me at 11 o'clock. We'd track the day in terms of the external event, wouldn't we? But let's track it internally. You know, woke up in the morning, kind of happy, very happy feelings, then unhappy, unpleasant for about 5 hours, and then a little bit happy, and then very unhappy. So in other words, there's the internal world and the external world. And we tend to think that whatever arises in here is the direct response to the outside. Of course we do. So the Buddha is saying each moment of every happy moment, moment by moment, second by second, millisecond by millisecond, you have a happy feeling, a pleasant feeling. Very pleasant, just blissfully pleasant, ecstatic, rapturous, or mildly pleasant. There's a whole spectrum, is there not? And that's the meaning of happiness. Happy feelings. In this use of the word here. Happiness, and a sensory consciousness or mental. So each of those moments of happiness, each of those moments of happy feelings is the fruit, this is the main cause of it, is the fruit of a past virtuous action 27 lives ago, 57 lives ago, 1,000 lives ago, that dropped a virtuous seed in your bank vault that upon contact now with the cake or the boyfriend, merely the catalyst, triggers one of those happy feelings, and one of those seeds ripens as a happy feeling. So we think it's the cake that is the cause. We think it's the boyfriend. We think it's the weather. This is the view of a samsaric person. Buddha says it's technically mistaken. And our tragedy is we don't know how to get pleasant feelings unless we get the cake, the boyfriend, the weather, the job, the pleasant sound, and so on and so forth. In other words, it's the role of attachment, this junkie in us that's always craving the happy feelings, and then out of habit assumes the cake is the cause of it, assumes the female body jumping on it is the cause of it, assumes the job is the cause of it, assumes the rainbow is the cause of it, assumes the words coming from the next door neighbor, hello Robina, you're very lovely, is the cause of it. So the only way we know how to trigger a happy feeling for one of those seeds to ripen is to get something on the outside. So basically we PISS our virtue down the toilets every day, because I think it's the cake that caused my happiness. My poor friend on death row in Kentucky thinks it's the torturing that causes his happiness, you know, happy feelings. I'm sure I use this example, I'll say it again. The fisherman, my example was this little boy. He'd killed in the past. He reached the killing karma ran. Finally, all the lower realms ran out. He got a human body again. But he woke up in this life with a tendency to kill. He had the main karma of the killing was finished. He got a human body as a result of non-killing, but he hadn't purified all aspects of his killing tendency. So he woke up in this life in a human body, and look at the world. Most humans kill with a tendency to kill. Mummy didn't teach him. And that started when he met fishing. So this is what happens. He met fishing. Someone took him fishing. Instantaneously, and this is in the 12 links of dependent arising, instantaneously, because of his past tendency to kill, which is programmed in his mind as a karmic tendency, and he hasn't purified it. It's like recognition. It's like he recognizes it. Wakes up the memory of it from the habit of having done it. And then equal to the intensity of his habit of having killed in the past, equals that next millisecond, the arising of very, very, very pleasant feelings. The next millisecond, and this is the 12 links, craving, attachment kicks in. And attachment paints a really delicious picture. The stronger the habit to kill, the stronger the feeling of pleasure, the more intense the attachment, paints a divine picture of this whole scenario that makes it look heavenly. That's how we're paralyzed in samsara. So of course, he would continue to go fishing because he's believing utterly that that was the main cause of his pleasant feelings. That guy in prison, the main cause of his pleasant feelings was of his habit of past torture was to think of torturing. And he couldn't do it on death row. His friends wouldn't let him torture him. That's why I'm glad he was at least in safe company. But the strength of the habit to kill from the past equaled for that fisherman the strength of his pleasure. And then the intensity of his attachment that kicked in and painted a divine picture of it. This is the technology of how we perpetuate samsara. So the best we do is eat cakes and jump on bodies, isn't it? Luckily, at least we don't kill and steal and lie to get those pleasant feelings. Of course, we just think it's evil. This guy's evil. He's evil. We think he's evil. He's evil, you know. No, he's got a habit to torture. Poor guy. That's all. And one of the tendencies of attachment is you think of the object all the time. So feeling pleasant feelings. We only want pleasant feelings. But because if we've got attachment, we assume the cake causes it, and the fishing causes it, and the sex causes it. That's why we're paralyzed in samsara. It's like we've got the wrong technology. We're misinterpreting the system. We're misinterpreting the analysis, you know. And also we conflate attachment and pleasant feelings. They are completely different parts of the mind. Attachment is a neurosis, a neurotic, deluded state of mind that exaggerates the niceness of something. And then believes that when I get that object, I will get happy. And I do get happy. Happy feelings are triggered. But I assume the killing or the torturing or the cake are the cause of it, but they're not. They're merely the catalyst. The cause of that joyful feeling is the virtue you created in the past. So every time we have a pleasant feeling now on the basis of cakes and sex and drugs and rock and roll and killing and stealing and torturing, your PISSING, your virtuous karmic seed down the toilet and using all your virtue to create more non-virtue. It's like technical, not moralistic. It's Buddha's analysis of samsara. That's why the very first level of practice, at least, don't worry about your mind yet. It's too complicated to train the mind, to control the mind. It's too advanced. Control the servants of your mind first. That's why the first level of karma is all about behavior, not about the mind at all. Buddha exhorts us to sort of refrain from these 7 little things. He says, at least don't kill, Robina. Don't use your body to harm others based on anger or attachment. Heavy duty, one of the heaviest things you can do is kill. Don't take the ungiven. Don't jump on the wrong partner. Just 3 main ones that harm others and therefore harm you heavily. And 4 of the speech, which is for us clever humans, isn't it? I mean, the birds and the donkeys make a few sounds, but they, you know, don't do too much harm. But look at us humans, our clever thoughts all expressed in these sounds, you know. So at least he exhorts us, he says, at least don't say words that aren't true. Mislead people. Therefore confuse yourself. Which to produce the habit to lie, and then the habit to be not believed. No one wants that. Don't use harsh language. We all know that one. So one of the karmic results of that is to be harsh-mouthed. And then one of the experiences of that is that even when you're being nice, speaking nicely, people think you're being abusive. I've got that one. I sound abusive the whole time. Shout and yell, you know. Isn't it? I do. And some people actually do hear it as abuse. A person emailed me recently. Said, it's really, my behavior was so wrong, he said. I'm impatient with people. I shout. So abuse people with your speech. The third one is don't just rabbit on, blur, 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 you know, pouring out the mouth irrationally. Don't just, you know, boring people to tears. And then the fourth one, and this is the heaviest one, I think, Don't badmouth behind backs. Finding fault. That's what splits up families, organizations, Buddhist centers, you know. So this is where to really see how we produce the person we become. If we could control our speech, just our speech, you would see your life transform. I'm not joking. It's an incredibly intense, conscious practice. We think it doesn't matter. We think I can say what I like. We don't think it has any implication. It's like thinking I can throw whatever seeds in the garden that I like, as if they have no fruits. It's schizophrenic. It's nihilistic. Everything we think and do and say counts. It's part of the process of producing the person we become. So harnessing the energy of our speech is a tremendous practice, you know. Some people have good speech. Some people have good behavior. It's very amazing. You're very fortunate. But just to control, you know, like this example of this mother with her child. One example, tiny example, one person, and you know yourself what we're like. Just to control the words we say. I always use this example. I'm not trying to make my family like saints, because we're not saints. There were 7 siblings. Well, only 6 now. My older sister fell down the stairs and she died 3 months ago. She fell the last 2 steps and fell on her head, smashed her head. She died. And luckily I was going to Australia anyway, and the Qantas put me on the flight earlier and I managed to get there. I asked, they said she was brain dead. And I said to my sisters, please keep her breathing. They said, she's dead, Robina, she's dead. I said, I know that, but just keep her breathing. Because the Buddha's view is her mind hasn't left the body yet. So I'm able to sat with her, saying prayers and things for her. Anyway, 6 of us now. And I can say the last 30 years, 20 years, we're all old, we're between 70 and 80, 7 of us. I really can say this. We've made an effort. Somehow it's been this gradual kind of unspoken agreement that we don't say bad things about each other to each other behind our backs, which is very common in families. And we do not talk about things we disagree with when we're together. So this is, in fact, so what's fascinating, what I've noticed, is that's what it's done. What it's done is it stops the tensions and the difficulties that you have with as siblings. You know, you cry, you forgive each other, you're bad, but it builds up. You know, so it's given space for virtuous thoughts and kind thoughts to arise, and nice words. I mean, siblings don't often praise each other. Siblings don't rejoice in each other's qualities. Do you understand? I know our siblings, we did not. There's jealousy and that kind of thing. Now we actually praise each other. And we're very, very different in many ways. I really find it astonishing. So the ceasing of the negativity of the speech has given space. And the sweetness between us is quite astonishing now. Are we communicating? I'm not saying we're saints. We're really not. It has enabled us to be more virtuous with each other and encouraged us to be kinder and to see our good. Maybe it's just natural old age. I don't know, you know, but it's really been quite a very fascinating experience to see that. Just don't say the negative words, you know, especially behind backs. So much. I mean, I've seen families divided into 3 groups, you know, the schisms in families and in Buddhist centers, in organizations. It's like a nightmare because of speech. You don't go around killing and stealing. It's speech, you know, speech is unbelievable. It's almost surprising because we think speech doesn't matter. I mean, you can get arrested for stealing $5. You can't get arrested for lying. I remember, I'll never forget, in Australia one time, there's one, actually it was in America too, there's one guy who pretended to be a monk and one woman who pretended to be a nun. And they were both genuinely, seriously, mentally ill liars. They lived in fantasy world every day. And they weren't a nun and monk, and they made up things all the time. But they both had charismatic speech. It was very powerful, very curious. So they convinced people. But they lying continuously and causing unbelievable distress and confusion, you know. And one woman went to the police. They said, there's nothing we can do. But if she'd stolen $5, they could have arrested her. You understand? So speech we just don't think is important. It's very fascinating. This other guy ran a Buddhist center, was causing unbelievable chaos. He lived in a fantasy, he knew nothing. He wasn't a monk, he said he was a monk. Everything he said was a lie. Everything he said was a lie. But he was charismatic, people liked him. It was very fascinating. So controlling our speech is incredible practice, I can't tell you. And that can make a huge difference in relationships. Of course, it's enormously difficult when there's so much energy between people, isn't it? So much energy building up between two people. It's almost impossible to control our speech. We just want to vomit everything out. And of course, part of the problem too in our culture, is that we don't have any ability to be aware of what's going on in our own mind. We feel we have to force it out of our mouth before we even hear it. And we want other people to hear what we have to say. We call it sharing. Isn't it? It sounds so noble, doesn't it? So much of it is because we can't, and this is such a cliche, but it's so true. If you're not conscious, if you're not aware of yourself, if you're not listening to your own mind, then of course you have to vomit it out because you don't know what you think until it's come out your mouth. And then of course we absolutely have to have the other person hear it. And this is our tragedy. It's like we don't think we exist if someone can't hear our words. Because we can't hear our own words. This is how sad we are, we're kind of disconnected from ourselves. So it's quite a conscious practice to control your speech. It's not just being passive aggressive and not saying anything. No, not like that. It's conscious. And the more you know your own mind, the more you become yourself. You don't feel driven to say everything you feel to somebody. Because this is the tragedy. This is pointing us really now to the deepest attachment of all. Way more than for sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and fishing and torturing. It's the attachment to being heard and seen and approved of by others. This is the deepest, most primordial emotional hunger we all have, the deepest. It's like we don't exist until someone else hears our words, until they approve of what we think. This is how much we suffer, That's why we're compelled to vomit everything out. This is our deepest suffering, our deepest attachment. Hard to recognize, hard to see it. Oh, I don't care what people think, will say. Utter nonsense. It's really until we realize emptiness that this one goes, In other words, this attachment, this deepest attachment, is the symptom of like a half a person. That the assumption is that I'm nothing, I don't have value, I am not worthy until someone else says I am. That's how mentally ill we are. And that's called attachment to being, they call it attachment to reputation. Sounds kind of boring, It's the basis of loneliness. I mean, what's loneliness? No one to share my thoughts with. So what we have to ask, what is it about my thoughts that aren't valid until someone else hears them? So why is it that you're hearing my words, my thoughts makes them valid? That's very, very bizarre, but that's how we are. And the irony is, you're the same as me. You don't think you're worthwhile until I hear your words. So we are like the two people propping each other up, trying to approve of each other. Whereas we've got to learn to prove ourselves. Then we can have wholesome relationships. Like literally, like the other half is not a joke. We're like half a person walking around looking for another half. It's really true. They say the yogis in the mountains who've given up all the attachments, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. are still thinking about what the people in the village are thinking about them. Because it's there all the time, having this conversation all the time. We're referencing what we're thinking and doing in relation to others, what they think of us. We're talking to people in our head. We're telling people what we're thinking in our head. We're wanting people to answer in our head, you know. Really all the time. So love and compassion and having relationships and sharing is marvelous. But this is the attachment part, which is what destroys the relationships, you know. Going beyond karma a bit. Sorry, here. What time is it? Oh, past 8. 7:30, 8 o'clock. Oh, it's time to go home. I didn't give you a chance. I've been raving on the whole time. I'm so sorry. Quick, any questions? Please, I'm so sorry. Any questions? Yes. Go, darling, talk to me. Yes.
I'm hearing about ethics and where ethics come in. You know, I read this holiness book 20 years ago, ethics for new millennials. And that sort of, I don't know, was so strong within me. And, you know, hearing you tonight speak, I see in my life how the mind, right, my thoughts do shape certain situations. You know, I see some of that very clearly. But what about ethics?
So the ethics is what I've been talking about, behavior.
Behavior.
Ethics is behavior.
Okay.
Ethics is living a life, at least, and this is why the first level, entry level junior school grade 1, really for Buddhism in terms of one's practice, ethics is you don't kill, at least the major ones. You don't harm others with your body and speech. And that alone is already a profound practice. And that's the basis of good ethics of your grandma or a good communist. And that's the secular ethics that Dalai Lama is talking about. So then, of course, you can start to join the dots then and realize it's also that refers to not eating too much and not having too much sex, because that makes you crazy because it's following attachment. But the main first level is at least refraining from actions that harm others, behaving nicely. That's huge, isn't it? It sounds boring, but it's really huge. Do you understand? That's ethics. And then it goes deeper. Then you get to the next level, and now you have the space to look into your mind, which is what drives your behavior. So ethics is body and speech, which is what impacts upon others. And if you think that alone, if we had impeccable behavior, that's what I'm saying about my sisters and my brother. Just us reasonably behaving nicely with each other, controlling the words we say, has transformed our relationships and therefore has encouraged kindness and rejoicing to arise. I'm not trying to make us saints. I'm really not. It's quite clear, you know. That's the benefit of good ethics. Do you understand?
And the other question I have is, what place then is universal values in with ethics? Universal values are different from ethics.
Tell me what that means. I don't know.
I think of
Whose term is universal values? What's that? Are you using somebody's phrase or are you just saying something?
Well, I thought that this was something that His Holiness talked about when we talk about the idea of equality or unity, wholeness, and oneness. I thought that was something that is.
Are you not saying that if you can have good ethics, then it expresses itself in all those things that you're saying? It would express itself in no racism. It would express itself in no gender discrimination. It would express itself in no greed, and it would spread out. I mean, really, it's almost like so simple. Good behavior. It can't remain as just behavior. Then you go and lie and steal behind the backs, you know. It's got to be not just to show. It's got to then, in the Buddhist view, it's a starting point of practice. Then it leads you. This is why I like to say, don't worry about the mind yet. Control the servants of the mind. And at least if you're controlling harming others, that you're going to be starting to control the anger then. And then you can get to see the anger. Then you can get to see the attachment. And that is really when you start to practice. And all that's really included, I think, in the universal values. That means no discrimination, no poverty. There wouldn't be that. You'd be sharing, you'd be not harming. That it would lead to that. It would lead naturally to then subduing the mind and having more equality. It would have to lead to that. Logically, I think. It was not just front, you know. saying one thing, which is always the biggest problem with religion. You know, you talk about all the, you know, and then you go off and jump on 7 prostitutes and then wonder why you get caught. I mean, it's schizophrenic, you know, ridiculous. Put our money where our mouth is, isn't it? I think if it's genuine, and that's really the Buddhist level of practice, first body and speech, then the mind, then compassion, benefiting others. It's a very logical progression. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Somebody here, yes. Good, Sunny, yeah, and then there's Terry. Go on. Who is there? Talk to me, darlings. Terry, sweetheart.
Hi, Venerable Robina. So, okay, so I put a little question in the chat, but my main question was, how do you view an influence of, like, say, family, teachers, friends, things like that, as far as affecting karma? Does it have any effect?
Massive. I mean, sweetheart, this is the thing. Massive. It's like I used the example before, like playing tennis. Everything you do in relation to the other has an impact on the other and on yourself. It's very dynamic. So, of course, you know, okay, put it this way, using the karmic one, your tendency to be good at tennis is what you bring with you, but how you play it and how the person playing with you on the other end of the court totally impacts upon your tennis. How can it not be? I mean, so of course, if you know, you can, if that's why the Buddhist view, let's say you're a teacher or a parent, you see, I'd say the addiction in the West a little bit is as soon as we see an angry child, we want to know what their mother did to them and what their genes are doing. That's fine. But the Buddhist view would be much more direct. If you see an angry child, then you can see that they've got a tendency to be angry. Whether their mother's a mean creep or not, in a sense, is not the issue. It can be, it's a part of it. But if you are a good teacher, you'll see this child who's got this anger, and by knowing about the anger and understanding your own anger first, you'll be an enormous influence in helping them. You understand? Of course you are. That's the whole point. That's what compassion is. You've got the wisdom wing and the compassion wing, and the wisdom wing is what we're talking here for yourself. But the compassion wing is how you help others, and you can't help others until you've done it yourself. So if you know your mind and your anger and your fears, you really are equipped to help another, because you can identify them and see the child and then help them. You absolutely, there's no question. It plays a massive role. That's called compassion, but it's based on wisdom.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
In other words, you can see a child, maybe he's got less tendency to play tennis, a bit clumsy, but if you know tennis well, you can teach them. You can encourage the tennis to come out. But you have to know it yourself. That's the key. Do you understand? Yeah, absolutely. This is called compassion, darling. There's no question. What else, people? Yes, Joe. Hello.
Hello, Venerable. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, can karmic seeds ripen without an external catalyst?
Give an example. You have anything in mind that you're thinking of?
Like you said about the person who is up in the mountain meditating, and he's wondering about what, so he has no external catalysts in terms of other people, let's say. So he has no interaction with other people.
Okay, no, that's more, I see, Joe. That's more to do with the depth of the subtlety of this particular attachment, which drives all of us. So the karmic one is more to do with an external event. Like the fisherman, he had a tendency to kill fish, but it wasn't triggered until he met the scenario called fishing. So you might have the tendency to play piano, but until you meet a piano teacher and meet a piano, it won't ripen. So things need external triggers. Absolutely. All the experiences we have. I mean, if you have the tendency to lie, but you never meet a person, you won't ever lie. But if you meet a person who lied to you in the past, the lie will come out. So the external condition, which is the experiences similar to the cause, as well as the environmental karma, they're the external triggers that activate the karma that's there. And it won't be activated if you didn't meet those conditions, for sure. But the one,
so I try.
Go on.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, nothing. It's okay.
I was going to say I try, so I tend to get angry. And so, for example, today somebody cut me off in traffic and I almost hit him.
Right.
And I'm consumed with the anger, but at the same time, I'm trying to say, okay, that's a karmic seed ripening.
Oh, I see. Okay. there. Okay, I hear you. The two things, Joe. One is, so this is the tendencies. You came into this life, you know, with one tendency to be angry. I'm sure you've got good qualities as well, but, you know, and I recognize anger myself too. So there's a tendency, that's the first track of karma, your own personal tendencies, your habits, right? Now, that habit is just there. So the guy up on the mountains has got no external trigger, but his attachment to being seen as a good person is going crazy. That doesn't need an external thing. It's in his own mind. So your anger is there. But in order for it to really vomit out, you needed that guy to cut in front of you. So that was the karmic seed ripening of that with you and that particular guy. But the anger is a tendency there anyway, but an expression of it, in this case, needed that guy to come along so you could shout at him. You understand what I'm saying? Get my point?
Yeah, I didn't shout at him, but yes, I understand.
My
Yeah.
point, my point. Yeah.
Last question. Do you have any plans to come to Canada?
I mean, I don't know, it's interesting, Joe. I've been on the road all these years, you know, homeless all these years, and now I've settled in New York City, and I almost plan to go do zero traveling, but I can be convinced to go anywhere. I'm a cheap date.
Well, New York's not that far. I'm in Ontario.
It's true.
Thank
No,
you.
it's
Awesome talking to you. Thank you.
these days. I've just settled in 2 weeks ago. All right, Joe. Maybe I'll see you somewhere. Okay, no. Okay. Who else? Some questions? No questions? Yes.
Is there maybe is there an original karma or first karma?
Now that's an interesting point. The petal, sweetie pie, there can't be, because that means that didn't have a cause, and you can't ever find something that didn't have a cause. So that's why the Christians, for example, about the Jews or anybody, they have this big philosophical discussion about there can be a first cause, and they call it God. For the Buddha knows such possibility. So consciousness is beginningless. Karma is beginningless.
Even before, wouldn't karma begin with life, with sentient beings?
Which sentient beings you're talking about?
Even the beginning of life itself.
You mean humans on this planet? Yeah, but they've been, I mean, this is where it sounds like science fiction.
Yeah.
The Buddha would say planets and environments and are beginningless, and humans are beginningless, and animals are beginningless, and hell beings are beginningless. I mean, logically, it's the only conclusion you can come to if you think it through, about if you take the view of cause and effect. And there's a very specific way Buddhism describes cause and effect, all kinds, and one needs to go into that. But the main cause of a mind can only be that previous moment of that continuity of consciousness. So that alone, you can never get back to where you say there's the first moment. But instinctively, we desperately want a first moment. We want a first Big Bang. As His Holiness said to the scientists, Big Bang, no problem, just not the first Big Bang, that's all. As nutty as it sounds, but it's logical, it's coherent intellectually. That if you have cause and effect, and the Buddha says it's the law that runs the universe, you can't have a first cause. That the Christians say you can, and they go on about God and everything. The Buddha would argue with that. So, yeah, but the point is that Buddha's found delusions and negative karma can be ended. That's what nirvana means. They can be ended. So in other words, you could have a chicken, but you can almost like you can't find the first egg, you know, but you can break an egg and never get another chicken, can you? Can't you? It's the same with the negative karma, you can finish it. That's what he's found, that all the neuroses and delusions are adventitious. They can be removed. That's what he means by nirvana. We can cease suffering and its causes. Quite precise. Yeah, some food to thought. Who else? Anybody else? Yes, John, talk to me.
Hi, Venerable, thank you. So I was just wondering about addiction specifically, where, like, you know, we use the example of the fisherman or other types of habits which affect others.
Yes,
but if someone, you know, is addicted to sex or chocolate cake or what, is that just because they liked it a lot in a previous life and they can't get rid of it? Is it, you know, is it like... Sure,
I mean, yeah, it's sort of obvious, isn't it, that if you are good at something, it means it comes easily. It's because you've done it before.
Mm-hmm.
So just think about it, that's all habits are. So some habits we can see are quite destructive to oneself and others. So, you know, we can see that, and some habits are quite helpful to help to others and oneself. So this is what we're trying to learn to do. But and this is really what addiction means. I mean, addiction is just another word for attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Buddha's analysis of attachment goes to very subtle levels, very subtle levels. So basically, he's really saying we're all junkies. It's just a question of degree and a question of the object.
Right.
So, you know, so attachment in the sense of being a neurotic state of mind. But if you can wake, you know, some people wake up in this life with kindness and love and compassion and goodness because they've practiced that before and it's effortless for them, you know. So it's just this habit. This is the second way that karma ripens, our personality traits.
Right.
Whatever you're good at, and whether it's playing music at the age of 3, it's because you've done it before. Whether you're tortured, it's because you've done it before, you know, in a sense, a simple way of saying it.
So would it be correct to say that the karmic reason to stop smoking, for example, is just so that you're not dependent on something external from yourself?
That's the key behind it. That's the real one.
Okay. Yeah.
See that. I know when I was, talk about smoking. I know before I was a Buddhist, before I was a Buddhist, I was a bit of an old junkie, not in heroin, but whatever I did, I was a bit of an old junkie. You know, I was like on speed, so until I could hardly take any more, then on 80 cigarettes. So I got to the point where I knew I couldn't have any more. So it was like, and clearly for me, always then, even then, was the freedom was not having to rely upon it, get out there at bloody midnight trying to find my Marlboros, you know, make you crazy, not to depend upon, not to be neurotically dependent upon something. It's a real freedom, isn't it? We know that.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, Sarah and Alex, sweethearts.
Hi there.
Hello, darling.
So this might be kind of a silly question, but it's something I always struggle with. Is there any kind of natural progression to how karma ripens? I guess kind of meaning, is this life that we're currently in indicative of what the next life will be, or is it completely random?
Not as simple as that. No, there are millions of karmic seeds in our mind. And depending on which ones are particularly strong, I mean, the karmic seed that caused you to go to Sarah's mother's womb at the time of conception might have been planted 1,000 lifetimes ago. It doesn't follow that it's a simple, you know, linear progression. There are billions of seeds in our mind right now, and depending on certain conditions, certain ones will be triggered. I mean, there can be relationship between this life and the next. You can, you know, maybe you're born for 5 lifetimes in a row, a last Tibetan monk at the same monastery, you know, it could be like that. But it doesn't always follow for sure. Not like that.
Thank you.
All right, darling. What else, people? Yes.
Does that mean that somebody like the Dalai Lama removed all of his negative karmic seeds before he's
Finish, you mean?
his lifetime?
Okay, so, okay, he's said to be a Buddha. And I say said to be because who do I know? What do I know? I've got a quote, you know, they say he's fully developed. They say he's done the job, which means he's quit the delusions. There's not an atom of negative karma left. And he's only got virtue and wisdom. But from that point of view, he doesn't need a human rebirth or any other. He's quit rebirths and the need for any of them. And this is the bodhisattva path. They make a strong, compassionate decision to take human births and others as well, solely for the sake of others. So they kind of get born, he's looking like a human and acting like a human and doing his best to make us think he's a regular guy, like he gets angry and everything. No one believes him, but he tries to convince us, you know.
But does that mean that before he became the Buddha, in whatever lifetime he did, that he got rid of every single negative karma?
Oh, absolutely. That's the whole point. Yes, exactly. Exactly. That's why when you hear, I mean, okay, I'll just tell you the word, for example, the word Buddha, first of all, is very interesting. I always quote this, the etymology. Buddha implies the eradication, utter eradication from your mind of all delusions and neuroses, and therefore negative karmic imprints, which sounds simple concept. And then da implies the development to perfection of all the goodness. Now that sounds simple, but then you start to read and hear about the qualities that you'd have if you had accomplished that. That's where it sounds like science fiction. So, you know, say, I mean, when Lama's open, he goes on and on about the qualities of a Buddha. So, I mean, even the lowest level bodhisattva, and there's 10 stages of development of becoming a Buddha, even the lowest level bodhisattva has the power to manifest their own mind in 100 different bodies simultaneously. So as you progress and you can, so basically one time you're a Buddha, your consciousness pervades the universe because it's not physical. And it can only be in sync with that which exists, because that's what its job is, to know that which exists. There's no mistakes left. Your mind pervades the universe. It sees the minds of all beings, all their past and all their future, and all the configurations and all the permutations of their karma. The Buddha's fundamental point is that which exists is cognizable by our mind. And when you're a Buddha, your mind cognizes that which exists. It's just the way it is. So the Christians give that job to God. The Buddha says everyone can do it. right? I always quote this. When I time in Melbourne, I was asked to give a talk at the Catholic University, some conference. They knew I'd been a Catholic. I remember I didn't know what to talk about until I got there. So I looked up the dictionary. The qualities of a Buddha, of God. There were three: infinite wisdom, omniscience, infinite power, and infinite compassion. And I thought, well, that's interesting. They're the qualities of a Buddha. So my 20-minute talk was the similarities between the definition of God and Buddha. I don't know if the Catholics liked it, but very many similarities. The difference, of course, is no creator, you know. So your mind pervades the universe. You can only know that which exists. It's beginningless and endless. It sees that which exists, all sentient beings. You have infinite compassion for everyone because you've cut any sense of a separate I, as if they're only you, as vast as space, have infinite compassion for each one. You have the wisdom to see their minds perfectly, and you have the power to manifest in countless bodies throughout countless space, for countless eons, in countless universes, for as long as suffering sentient beings exist. Now that's Buddha. And it sounds hilarious. It sounds like a joke, you know. And it's all in literature, it's all there. So yeah, that's, if he has a key, that's what he's doing. He won't admit to it, of course. He'll just tell you he's a regular guy, gets angry with his mum or something, you know. No, he would never get angry with his mum. He wouldn't.
He's a simple Buddhist.
What?
He is a simple Buddhist.
That's what he, yeah, that's right. And interestingly, that's all he is as well. It's also true, exactly. Yeah. Okay.
Venerable, there's a question in the chat.
Good. What is it?
Okay, from Trey, Washington.
From who?
Karma and free will relate? Does the necessary preconditions?
I need you to speak more clearly, Sonny.
Excuse me?
I can't hear you, dear.
Oh, I'm sorry. How do karma and free will relate? Does the necessary preconditions arising with the seed always mean the fruit is born?
Who's saying this? Who is it? Who's talking to me?
Trey, you want to unmute and
Where? Who's here? Who's speaking? I can't see who's talking.
Right. He put his question in chat. He says in chat he doesn't have his mic set up.
Okay. Who's the person talking? What's his name?
This is Trey.
Trey.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Trey. Okay, good. Okay, so first of all, we have to analyze this free will business. It's very interesting. It always comes up. First of all, we have to give it its appropriate historical context here, and it's a teaching of Jesus Christ. So I don't know why people use it as if it's some kind of scientific truth, and many people do tend to talk about it, and maybe it is scientific truth now, I don't know, for some people. But Trey, I would suggest it's not a Buddhist concept at all, because it's got real problems with that phrase, free will. So free seems to me to imply that the decisions you make don't depend upon anything. And that is a meaningless concept. There's not a single tiny thing that exists in the universe that isn't a dependent arising. So every decision we make is dependent upon many factors. It's very simple. But for some reason, when we hear about karma, we hear that somehow that seems to contradict the ability to make a choice, but it informs our ability to make a choice. So the thing is, theoretically, so this is the thing, theoretically, we can say, theoretically, in general, we can say everybody possesses Buddha nature. Everybody has, we can say, everybody theoretically has the ability to change their mind. That is a statement of fact. Buddha would agree with that. But look at this. If you have two children, doesn't matter, old people, young, doesn't matter, anybody, two children, one of them has a strong tendency to be angry. I don't care why you think they've got it. Don't worry about karma. Just say they've got it. You can see the evidence, they shout a lot. Two 8-year-old kids, one has a tendency to be angry and one doesn't. So straight away, theoretically, yes, everyone has the potential to change. Everyone has the potential to stop being angry. It's a fact. But look at the particular environment, a particular situation of one kid with a strong tendency to be angry and the other kid with not. Then obviously the one who's got no tendency can get ahead of the game really easily, and the other will really struggle. In fact, it might even, even if you'd said to me before I met the Buddhists, Robina, you can change your anger, I would have laughed at you and even thought you're stupid, because I thought anger was good. What do you mean change my anger? What are you talking about? So it would have been foolish. Where's so-called free will? It's meaningless. My ability to change my mind was dependent upon where you're at. It's like saying everybody has the potential to play music. But, it depends on having a piano, a teacher, how strong you've practiced it. It depends upon so many factors. So the concept of free will is literally a misnomer for Buddhism. There's no such concept. But everybody does have the choice every second. But whether you can exercise it or not depends on other things, It's a dependent arising. So the fact is, karma is not denied. I mean, choice isn't denied by karma. Choice is informed by karma. Your ability to play music at this moment in time is totally dependent upon the other factors that come in, that have come up to this present. Totally, everything's like that. You can't have free will. Free means it's not dependent, and there cannot be such an event. There cannot be such a thing. Nothing is independent. Everything is dependent arising. So that's the best I can say. I hope it answers the question. What else? People? Questions? The other questions? Oh, nothing.
Eileen has a question.
What, darling?
Eileen?
Oh, good, Eileen. Talk to me, darling. Where are you? I can't see you. Yes, Eileen. Yes, talk to me.
Eileen, you're muted.
Yes, sweetheart. You're muted, Eileen.
Eileen, you're muted.
Yeah. Unmute, Eileen.
Okay.
There we
Got
go.
it. All right, thank you. Just two things briefly. One thing was, you mentioned lower realms run out and then the person takes rebirth again. I'm not quite sure what that means.
Okay. There are 4 ways karma ripens. Killing.
Yes.
Using the fisherman as an example. This means we have to do this next week. We have to go into this one next week, Eileen. Okay. So this is the crucial, this is where the role of living in vows and purification play a massive role. I'll say it briefly now. So there's this little boy. He's a human being. So now we can deduce from his response to seeing the fishing that he basically fell in love with it and spent the rest of his life fishing. We can deduce from that he's got the tendency to kill from having killed before. Now, the fact that he's got a human life indicates that a non-killing karmic seed was triggered at the time of his past death. But we have to deduce, because he's got a strong tendency to kill, that he's been in the lower realms in the past. So that is the main result of killing. And that karma the main result ran out by being in the lower realms. He finished that main result. So he gets a human body. But the tragedy is, because he hadn't purified all aspects of killing, he had the 2 residual results of killing. He woke up with a tendency to kill, and he also incidentally died young. He died at the age of 29. So they're 2 of the 3 residual results left over from the main karma. So a difference would be, there's always another example I use, a friend of mine, Day Chen, when her little boy, she was taking the lice out of his head. He was the age of 3, and he was in tears of compassion for the lice. Don't kill them, mummy, don't hurt them, it's their home, leave them alone, don't hurt them. So he has never killed a living thing in his life. He's like 45, 50 by now. And so we can deduce that he too has got a human body as a result of not killing, but we can deduce he's purified all aspects of killing by having lived in vows in the past, because he wakes up in this life with no thought to kill. And this is the main one. Because if you just then spend the rest of this life killing, you piss your life down the toilet and you go straight back to the lower realms. So by living vows and purification, these will purify all aspects of the negative karma. And we'll go into this next week.
All right. Thank you, Robina. The second thing I just want to ask, now that you're in New York City, would you be interested in doing a Buddhist retreat at Garrison Institute for 2.5 days?
You mean leading one?
Yes.
Yeah, sure, if you want me to. I don't know.
Okay.
You work at the Garrison Institute?
I don't. I live near the Garrison Institute now.
They've got to invite me, don't they? You can't force me.
Yes, yes. All right,
I'm coming.
I'm just curious whether or not you'd be interested.
Of course, anytime. I mean, I'm happy to travel, but a little bit here and there. Whiz off for a weekend instead of an entire year. I've been usually going for a whole year.
Yeah,
Now I'm becoming a bit attached to my nice new home, you see.
yes. Well, that's what happens in Manhattan. You don't want to leave.
No, well, I mean, I've got to, it's okay. I'm getting old now, you see. So I've got to
Yes.
edit and write and before I die, not waste my life.
Mhm, mhm.
All right.
Thank you, Robina.
Thank you. Well, it's time to go home, isn't it? I think so. Yes, 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock, sorry, my watch is still late. Yes.
Is it any better?
My knees, I know, it's very curious. I fell about 10 feet. No, sorry, let's exaggerate. 5 feet. I fell thrust forward off a chair, my wheelie chair. Can you imagine how stupid I was standing on my wheelie chair? And it wheeled away one way and I threw the other way. And I landed on the middle of my knees. No, I can't do anything. I can't. They don't hurt to walk, but it's the nerves. Someone sent me some moxa. It's going to show me how to use the moxa on it. It's all nerve pain and bruised. I can't do my prostrations. I can't kneel down, but getting better. That was a long description of what happened. And I upset the downstairs neighbor. She banged my ceiling with her stick. The big fat crash with my chair and me falling on the ground. I know, so stupid. What do you expect? You know, I mean, I'm an old lady as well, and my four slants. And I was on a wheelie office chair trying to put something up on a high shelf, and the chair went that way and I went that way. Very not so smart. I'm sorry. I'm not so smart. It's true. I'm optimistic. One way of putting it. An optimistic way of saying it is I'm optimistic. Oh, it's okay. I can manage, I'll say. You understand? I didn't. They're getting better. Okay, petals. Happy to see you all everywhere. And we'll continue next week. We'll go into why we want to live in vows and purification to try to show the logic of these things, okay, psychologically. So we're talking here, it's basically Buddhist psychology, all we're discussing here. Okay. So if any of it makes any sense whatsoever, and you want to take away some of it, 1% even, that's fine. You can be a 1% Buddhist. Apply it. But the main let us try to see how we produce ourselves, have a sense of responsibility, you know. It's very powerful. Even not sure about future lives, don't worry about that. Just know by how we act and think and feel now, we can change ourselves, become a happy person, a wise person, a kind person. Changchuk Semchok Rinpoche. Ma ke panam ke guchi ke panyam pa me pa yang gong ne gondu pabashog. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Zooms. So much down.
Thank you, Venerable Robina.
Thank you, Venerable Robina.
Thank
Thank you. Love
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Venerable